So, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Jerry Hancock, and his son Thomas, who's visiting with him. With a strong entrepreneurial spirit, Jerry Hancock has always been interested in improving processes and products around him. Jerry has a chemistry degree from Brigham Young University and a background in design and sales, and brings a vast network of concepts, innovations, and ideas to the frozen dessert industry. Jerry and his wife Naomi opened their first Sub-Zero nitrogen ice cream in 2004. And I'm curious, has anybody ever eaten at Sub-Zero? Yep, I've eaten there. All right, we've got a few people here. So in 2004 was their first store. Since then, the company has become a regional sensation, bringing dessert goers around the world a delicious, cool, and sensational treat. Jerry applied for a patent on his unique process of freezing ice cream in 2005. In 2008, Sub-Zero opened its first franchise location and has grown to 26 stores currently. In 2013, Sub-Zero had the opportunity to pitch on ABC's Shark Tank. Anybody ever watch Shark Tank TV show? You may have seen Jerry and Naomi there. We were watching it in 2014. Even though they did not get a shark to invest, the media exposure was extremely beneficial. And we are thrilled to have Jerry here with us today. So please welcome Jerry.
So I first want to talk about, he explained who I was and what we've done, and it's been interesting. Thomas here was 5 years old when we started it, and I remember him being in the store. We'd have him in the store, so he's pretty short back then. He's grown, and it's but when he was in the store, he'd want to help out, so he would set up crates at the by the sink, and he'd be so he could get up on actually do dishes. So he would, and then he'd have this lab coat that we'd have, and he had this little cart, and he'd get a bowl of nitrogen, and he'd come out in the space, and he'd try and do presentations with customers. And I was mentioning that with somebody that I haven't talked to since those days, and that was a customer, and he says, "Yeah, I remember your son doing that," and it was a lot of fun. So so what we were trying to, so the thing I want to first talk about is a little bit about, briefly describe me and my experiences. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is I grew up in Idaho. Was not a farmer. My dad was an architect, so I spent a lot of time. He decided, and he said because he didn't have a farm, that he would buy a building. So he bought this 1914 building, and I spent most of my childhood restoring that building. So I was doing a lot of destruction, not as much construction. I was doing a lot of the demolition. It was a very big building, so it was a medical office space before in 1914. So it's then I always knew I could get something if I could sell something. And back in the day, you had Boys Life, and then the back you could sell cards or something, and you go door to door, and I'd say, well, I could get a fishing pole if I sold so many boxes of cards. So I knew I could get something. So when I was in junior high, I was running cross country in high school too. But and I wanted to go to the National Scout Jamboree, and I wanted to go to the Nationals for cross country. And so my dad bought 500 bushels of apples, and I went door to door, just polishing up an apple and selling apples in the middle of the winter. And then to go to the Nationals, I just knew that it's just all you got to do is, if I want this, all I got to do is sell this. So I sold candy bars. Back then, it was Snickers were 15 cents wholesale, and I'd buy them wholesale. And I was selling $100 worth of candy bars in the hallways in junior high, and it was just always selling something. So then I just figured I'd end up in sales. When I went to college, I didn't have a way to pay for it, so I went into the Air Force Reserve, and my career field was ejection seats. So I worked on ejection seats on F-16s, and then that gave me some mechanical ability. And then my cousin came up with this idea about an eyeglass retainer that keeps your ears warm. It doesn't go around your head. So I was like, well, it doesn't really work. So I spent 2 months working on the problem, and then we got a patent on that product and tried to take it to market. We we didn't lose money, but we didn't really make any money. It was either going to school or do that. So there was some product development experience, and then I took a year of industrial design. I have a degree in chemistry because the industrial design school said, hey, you're taking up a seat. If you can handle chemistry, you need to do one or the other. And so I was like, and so I went and finished with chemistry, but I worked in software, worked for a professor where I did software. Well, it was theoretical chemistry, which is computer modeling of energy states of atoms so you can figure out what a reaction might be before you end up trying to synthesize it. So you don't have to waste the time in the lab when you don't really know where you're going. And so I'm going to give you one. It's a really cool product, or what happened. But columns are what they use for separating minerals, like for soft water. So if you think about water goes in and you have soft water comes out, well, those minerals have to stick in that column. And so there's these beads, and the minerals stick to that column, and then it comes out the other end with nothing. Well, that's because those petroleum beads inside the column, the tank. But then it can't, if you just keep on running in there, it'll get filled up. So then it releases with salt. So then they run salt water at night, and then that releases out. So if you think about ibuprofen is, if you know anything about chemistry, if you look at it, it's got a structure, right? Well, some molecules have a structure that, let's say it looks like this. It also looks like that. They're a mirror image, but they're not the same thing. They are the same thing. One is called R and one's called S. So it's a right and left. But they don't act in the body the same. One actually sticks and activates, and the other doesn't. But when you create ibuprofen, you get 50% you can't get one or all of one or more of one than the other. You get 50%. So you could make a more potent drug, for instance, if you could separate that. And that's what we were working on, is figuring out if we could get R and S molecules to slow down inside a column. So the theoretical chemistry gave me some computer experience, which it got me a tech support job, but then got me into working at Novell and other software companies, which then led me to being laid off. Now, which meant I had to find something else, so we bought a franchise. Something we could afford, which wasn't the greatest franchise, but it was, and we weren't making it. And that's where Sub-Zero came into play, because we had extra space, and what were we going to do with it? So we went to the customer, and I know I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to come back now. I want you to look around the room, and I want you to, is everybody in here the same? Are you guys, no, everybody's different, right? Every single person in the room has had different experiences. They have different, every day you have a different experience. You think about a science fiction, and you have these, you have a timeline and it drops off, like the Loki, you have different timelines. And everybody has, if you think about that with people, everybody has different experiences, infinitely different experiences. And so when you look at a resume, the thing you want to do is you don't want to, I used to write to the job and try and put everything I could in about the job. But what I think is more important is to talk to your difference. What makes you different? Why are you different? Now, why has liquid nitrogen ice cream not been done in a commercial? Now, it had been done before. I'm not going to say it hadn't, but it had not been done in a commercial environment. When I went to when I started testing it, so anyway, back one more. Okay, so so why has Sub-Zero ice cream not happened before this product? Before 2004. There's been copycats since, but there hadn't been this in a commercial environment. And I would say that's because chemists that did it in academics were just trying to show that it could change state. They weren't trying to make a good product. Chemists have a very different way of thinking. So when they're trying to solve a problem, they're trying to be very precise. So they're trying to drop the temperature very slowly, and it doesn't make a great product when you do that. So the other thing is that food people, restaurant people aren't scientists. So they're thinking about what is already out there. They go to a show and they look for a machine. They're not looking for, how do I do this completely out of the box? So you blend these together. I had a food background from having the franchise. I had product development experience. So I went to the customer. I said, what do you like about other people's product? Or what should we add here? First of all, I left it wide open. I was actually thinking clothing boutique. Okay, that was where my mind was. But I went to the customer. I said, what do you like? What do you think we ought to add as an extra store in here? Now, clothing boutique is not ice cream, but I left it wide open. So he said ice cream. Why didn't you add ice cream? You got Hoagie Yogi. Not the best example looking backward, but it was back then. It was it was still a pretty good example of co-branding. So then so I said, all right, I'll look into ice cream. So I went to the ice cream manufacturer. Will you help me make an ice cream shop in this store? They said, yes. We don't recommend it. I'm coming to you and asking to buy product from you, and you're telling me not to do it? Okay, then I said, and they give one caveat, and they said, unless it's different. So that brings me back to the product development experience that I had previously. And I went to the customer, I said, what do you like about other people's products? Well, how do you make it better? So I specifically targeted 2004 Cold Stone. I said, what do you like about Cold Stone? How do I make it better? And everybody said, well, they gave me two answers. They said, it's either really good ice cream or it's entertaining. Neither one of those made any sense to me. I go, okay, I don't get it, but let's follow a follow-up question. What makes it really good ice cream? They said, well, they take a brownie and they mush it up. Okay, well, that's customization. It's not really having anything to do with the ice cream, it's customization. So they said, what makes it entertaining? Well, they take a brownie and they mush it up. Okay, that's entertainment for you? Great. But so I said, well, how do I make it better? And the only thing I could think of, this comes back to the chemistry. These are experiences. These are my experiences. It comes back to the chemistry. How do you make it better? The only way I could think of to make it better is to change the flavor. Now, part of that's because the shop we owned was called New York Burrito. And New York Burrito, you'd get a tortilla, different flavored tortilla. You put the different types of rice, put different types of meats, kind of a Chipotle, but a little bit more broad because they'd have Thai and they'd have other things that were very different, not Mexican. So it was, so my customization was on my mind. So I said, well, how do you make it more custom than adding a mix in? Change the flavor. Can I change the flavor to a solid? Can I take a solid and add a flavor to it? Nope. It's a solid. It doesn't dissolve in. So I can't change the flavor of a solid. So I have to start with the liquid. And this is where the science comes in. This is why I do a lot of STEM presentations, because I start with, the whole business started with states of matter. And so we do quite a bit of STEM outreach, and we talk about, we do 45 minutes of STEM before we get to the ice cream. And I said, well, this is why states of matter matter. So now, my unique experiences are what made that happen. Now, I have other unique experiences that are maybe not as positive on a business perspective. And what I mean by that is I've had partners that have been abusive, and I'm going to talk a little bit about now. I really want to get some input from you guys too as we go along with this. And I've had really high and really low experiences, and with business. This lady is probably the high. And that's because she's my wife and we've worked on it together. Most people would say that they can't work with their spouse. I would say that's probably, you're going to find if you survey 100 people, if they had a business together, it would probably cause a divorce. For us, okay, I was in the National Guard. I worked in a top secret post for the last 13 years when I was in the National Guard. It wasn't the stuff that I didn't really deal with intelligence, so I could come home and I could still talk. But I had a top secret clearance. I was in an area where really wasn't supposed to talk about what's in that vault. But the point of the matter is, people that have a top secret clearance, that work in a job like that, inherently get divorces. Why? Because they have separate lives. The wife goes here, and the husband goes here, and they can't talk about their day. And I can't imagine a more miserable life than not be able to come and talk and share about your experiences throughout the day. Entrepreneurship is a very different thing. You have to be unified. If you don't, it will break apart, whether it's a partnership or whether it's a marriage. So there's this talk that was given at BYU, Idaho, by Elder Robbins, called "Making a Life, Making a Living." And I'm not going to reference it too much, but he goes through basically. He starts with Adam and Eve, and he says, with Adam and Eve, they were told to work. If you look at really the instruction, you're told to go work. So, basic instructions. There was more words than that, but that's what he said. The Lord said, go work. Okay, but he didn't have property lines to deal with. He didn't have conflict with other people that he had to deal with. As time went on, there were conflict. And that conflict is continued today. So again, different experiences. So now, then it goes on and talks about grading your business. We're all accustomed to grades, so if you think about, he gave a grade. I'm just going to refer to the grading. He gives an A, B, and C level a company, and I thought he had it in a chart. He does. So he says, an A, he says, and I try to do this. I'm not going to say that I do it all the time, but when I'm dealing with somebody, I never want to be able to say I'm sorry. It needs to be a win-win, or else I can't have a very good conscience. And it's not always a win-win. It's not always your fault, but it doesn't really matter. It matters that if I've offended somebody, I should try and make things right. So he says an A is love of God and fellow men. Second, so that's primary motivation. That would be an A. Second is motivation is income. Then he says B is money or love of money for the second motivation. So he says he's not saying money's bad. So a C is love of money, indifferent to the client or customer. Okay, and then D is filthy lucre, and when he talks about that, he's really talking about damaging products. And then harm to the customer, and then the last is filthy lucre and harm to the customer and society as a whole. Now, there are people out there in business, and we often, and it's unfortunate, me and my wife joke, and I'm going to probably say something, I hope I don't offend anybody here. There's a book called Mormon Way of Doing Business, and back in the day, that was back when Star Trek was Deep Space Nine. You had the Ferengi, and we always said, well, the Ferengi are like the Mormons. And and the reason is because it's not personal, it's just business. And how many times do you hear that in business? You hear that a lot. And I was 2 days ago, I was at one of my lowest points when it came to business. When it came to my emotions and dealing with business, I almost lost faith in humanity as a whole. And I asked God, I said, take this hate. I don't want it. I can't have it. And I'd been trying to reach out to probably one of the most wealthy people in Utah, that in my opinion is one of the most evil people. And I'm not going to mention his name, but be glad to share it, because you want to avoid those types of people. You want to avoid, everybody's heard, you guys are dating in the dating age, and you've seen the videos that complain about narcissists, right? Dating a narcissist and how dangerous that can be. It's just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, to be partners with a narcissist. What I'm getting at is that when you think about business, think of how you would grade the situation. Think about the decision you're making. Think about how the other person is making their decisions. Because you can't change them. You have to be compatible with your ethics. And ethics is really, really important. Now, why did it change? Why did my day change yesterday? Because after I said that prayer, I had 2 calls out of the blue. Don't know these people. People have never been in the store. These are business people. One from Chicago, one from Salt Lake, never been in the store, but he was calling me from DC. And he called me. He saw your post. Doesn't know me. We don't have any connection whatsoever, both of these people. Now, usually when people call you and say, I want to help you, I feel like I'm playing poker. In other words, they're holding their cards. And, hey, I'll help you. Give me something first. Okay? It's really tiresome, but that's really, really common. You guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's really common. These guys called me and said, how can I help you? Here's some names. I'm going to make the introduction. These are big names, too. I don't want anything for it. One guy was selling paper pulp and I can't buy paper pulp. I have no use for paper pulp. The other guy was government housing. We have nothing to gain. He has nothing to gain. My point in that is that think of how you can give. Always think about how you can give. Now, there's a group that we used to do that was a Shark Tank mentorship group, and we would get together once a week on a Zoom call. And there was always a rule: you had to come with a give, and so so everybody had to go around. And what can you give this week? And sometimes it was a tool, some was like a coaching, something was a contact. The best networking events you can do, and networking is important, is where you're not selling. So if it's, now I'm one of the rare people, I'll take almost any sales call because I think I can learn from somebody. So it's, now sometimes that's not great because it's a waste of time, but what am I giving that salesperson? I'm also giving them a chance to hone their skill. Sell is a skill. I'm not really just taking. I'm also giving him feedback, and oftentimes I'll say, listen, if you just adjusted this market, you've got this opportunity. So I don't know where we're at on time. Okay, great. So anyway, how many people have been to Sub-Zero? Okay, you guys. So sometimes down here, we get confused with the sign that's out on the highway, and people said, well, yeah, there's a Sub-Zero down on, and that actually goes back to 1998. It's a pretty old sign, and they actually filed for a trademark. We probably wouldn't have got the trademark had they actually completed their trademark. So, what's that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting. And actually, early on, we got some gift cards that came from that store. We're like, well, these aren't our gift cards, but I still accepted them. Anyway, it was kind of funny. And but there's so trademark is important as when you're looking at businesses. We have the trademark for the words Sub-Zero, anything dessert. So anything dessert or treats, that kind of thing. Since we're right now dealing with a company in Florida, and she's saying we're Big Bad Wolf because we notified her that she's using Sub-Zero Italian ice, and she's selling ice cream. I have a store in Tampa right next to where you're at. It is confusion, and but she doesn't think that she has to live by trademarks. But it's very expensive to enforce it. It's more expensive for patents. So but anyway, so this is liquid nitrogen. So this in here is negative 321 degrees below zero. So it's very, very cold. Now, so just so you know, what we derived is, remember back to the definition of the product. The product had to be custom made to order because it had to start with a liquid. You walk in, you choose your cream, choose your flavors, so you can change the flavors. A lot of problems with that. Now, what I'm going to say that, people oftentimes, investors, criticize our business because they say, well, how come you haven't grown faster? Well, I don't know, because the first 10 years was testing, and there's a lot of figuring out that when you're trying to develop something that's completely different, and it's a lot easier when somebody can just come around and copy it. And it's so if I go to a yogurt place and I just want to buy soft serve machines, I can just buy those soft serves and dump anything in. I buy it for $3,000. I could buy a coach and teach me how to make any product. And then it's just marketing. By the way, great marketing on the wall. But the point of the matter is that I'm not going to say marketing is easy, but that's a whole lot shorter time frame than trying to develop, taking 4 or 5 years. Now, so we go through this process. What's one of the problems you think we might have with flavoring a single serving? Because typically I'm going to say that most ice cream is done in 10-gallon batches or more. So if I'm making 6 ounces or 4 ounces of ice cream mix, what's one of the problems I would have with flavoring? Right. Anybody baked? Anybody bake? Yeah, you baked. When you're using an almond extract, you use a lot or a little? Is that right? So if I took a half a teaspoon and put it in, if you're putting in baking, it's quite a bit of volume. But if I'm putting it in 4 ounces, it's like drops, right? It's very, very little, and it's suspended in alcohol. So if you have the wrong concentration, it's going to taste bitter because alcohol is bitter. So getting the flavoring right. So we were trying to use flavorings that were off the shelf, that were concentrates. So then you're like, well, it's just not working. For after about a year and a half, half the customers was too bitter, too soft. It's just not right. The Goldilocks experience. So it's so we started right. Let's dilute it. Okay. Well, when things are concentrated, they actually last a long time. They don't just spoil. So extracts or emulsions don't spoil. But if I take a strawberry emulsion that's concentrated and then I dilute it, because when you dilute it to, say, a Torani type syrup consistency, it's about 20-1 water. When you add that much water, it starts to ferment. Well, now I'm making flavors every day. So, and I'm throwing it out because it's fermenting. Chocolate's fermenting. I'm trying to, if you want a really cool experiment that's really messy, take some cocoa powder, mix it with water, and put it in a bottle. And the next day, it'll probably 100 times its volume because of the fermentation that happens. By the way, cocoa is already fermented, so it doesn't take much to get that started again, and it would just go all over the place. So then that doesn't work. So then there's a lot of things that we had to figure out. Not just the process of making the ice cream. Now, when I started looking at, like, I wasn't even thinking about ice cream. I saw an article that was in Popular Science. And that's where things started. But then people would say, well, then why is it patented? Because the process didn't work the way he described it. And I went and interviewed him, and the author, Theodore Gray, and I said, why did you use this word? And he says, I was just trying to use a cooking term. He says, I pour a nitrogen syrup into the mix. And I'm going, well, it doesn't even make any sense. It's not a syrup. Okay, what I mean by that is nitrogen doesn't, I don't have my clear one. Oh, I do. Okay. Okay. So we want to make the ice cream before the end, or we want to make it after?
The students have to leave.
Oh, okay. All right, I got it. So so if I take this, also using nitrogen directly is kind of difficult. So this right here is nitrogen. Okay, so that's what we did to the sharks. A little more flair, but that was, and I get a lot of screams with younger kids. Oh, maybe I should just shoot it at him. Maybe I'll get more screams. So so when I do younger kids, I get screams. So it gets pretty loud. But anyway, when you slow it down, when it comes out, it wants to evaporate really, really quickly. So when you slow it down, it comes out as a rain. So we use this nozzle. Now, cryogenic nozzles, like this little piece that's in here, that's rated for that, they cost about $85. What I figured out is if I use a muffler that comes off of a compressor, it costs about $5. So I use the $5 version. So see how it comes out as a rain? And what I mean by a syrup would dissolve into something. If I'm folding, and he used the word in the article, fold like egg whites, okay? Folding egg whites would mean it would incorporate or dissolve into something. Well, you can see it floats. It doesn't incorporate, it doesn't dissolve into water, it doesn't dissolve into anything else. So that's so what we found is that the academics were putting a bowl of nitrogen, they were putting a bowl of cream about halfway to 3/4 of the way up. This is what they do in chemistry class. They add a cup of nitrogen at a time. Well, if it floats on top like that, and if you put a cup on there, it's not going to cover the surface. If it doesn't cover the surface, it's also going to be very hyperactive. It's what they call the Leidenfrost effect, and we won't go into that right now. But if I pour it on the floor, you see what it does. It just skirts across. And it's just like a hot or cold water on a hot pan. So when you put cold water on a hot pan, it sizzles and it floats. And that's what's happening with the nitrogen. It's floating on the floor. Now it does the same thing on the cream. So if I add a little bit of nitrogen to the cream, and then I stir, it says stir, and then repeat. Okay, I'm trying to drop the temperature. Chemists are trying to drop the temperature really slow. And so they're trying to, so as they do that, then it's very hyperactive. You stir it, it goes right out to the edge, hits the bowl, makes the bowl cold, makes a really hard crust around the outside, it's still liquid in the center. Okay, what we figured out is that if you put all of the nitrogen in at once that you need to make that portion of cream, that it makes a larger than the depth surface area coverage, and then in between it creates a layer like a frozen lake. And in that frozen lake, then we take this spade and we go around the edge, and it's a very thin sheet, and it raises up. As it raises up, it goes and creates another layer. And that's the process we patented. We patented the process that was novel. No one had made a frozen layer sheet in between before. So it's interesting to me that all something has to, the definition of whether something is patentable is whether it's novel. In other words, it's new. Nobody's done it before. And somebody in the art wouldn't think of it. I'm a new process. I'm not going to talk about it today, but I'm writing a patent on. I called the founder of Dippin' Dots. I said, have you ever thought of this? It's very similar to his old process. No, never thought of that. It's novel. That's the test of whether it's novel. He's an expert. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to make some ice cream. Oh, wrong. Take the. What, you got any idea of flavors you guys want? Huh? I've got any combination of raspberry, mint, cake batter, coconut, cheesecake, cotton candy, mint. You want mint, huh? Cake batter? Oh, we'll make a cake batter. How about mint cotton candy? What do you do cotton candy with at the store? What's a? Um, no. There's one that the employees really like. That's like, okay. The employees were like coming and we're like, what? Mint cotton candy? What are you talking about? So we come up with some interesting flavors at the store. So we'll do a mint cotton candy. The best of both worlds, right? And so we're doing a lavender honey this month as a special. And then later in the summer, we're going to be doing a jalapeno cranberry. More scooping. Yeah. You said cake batter? Okay. So as a summary, first thing is define who you are and what makes you different. The second thing, and I'm going to end with one other perspective. The best solution, which is difficult to find, there's a book called Traction that is written by an author called Gino Wickman. And it's oftentimes used in franchising. Now, franchising is a different business, which is a very difficult business because if you think about it, if I'm coming up with a concept or a system and I'm franchising it, that means I'm selling it to somebody else which is a customer, independent owner, but the end customer, and I have to deal with this customer and this customer which has very different needs. So it's a very, very complex business, much more complex than I ever expected, because you've got to service both of those. Now, Gino Wickman talks about traction. Now, traction has basically two components. There's well, and so traction says that there's, rather than a CEO in a business, which is, the chief decision maker, does everything, but is, if you guys have heard the E-Myth, it's a similar type of idea. The E-Myth, the guy that started the bakery is because he really likes to bake, but he doesn't realize he doesn't really like doing the bookkeeping and all the other things. So with traction, there's a guy that had the vision for the company. I'm a visionary. And so then there needs to be something, another person that's an executor, and they calls that an integrator. So you don't have but they have to be equal. So you have the visionary and you have the integrator. And so, and and so Roy Disney was the integrator, Walt Disney was the innovator. So you had to have a visionary, you have to have a, now there's one more thing I wanted to say. Businesses should have a purpose. The purpose should not be making money. The purpose should have a greater purpose than just making money. So what is our purpose? Our purpose is to have a custom experience that you can come in, but we encourage STEM education. Through ice cream. Okay, let's do raspberry coconut. Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's kind of was how I was trying to keep it, is like with the pauses. So I apologize if I didn't. Yeah.
Put liquid nitrogen in like a water balloon. And you could you do that?
It'd be difficult. It would. Let me give you. Does somebody want to? Who would like some ice cream? So I don't want to hold anybody up.
Let's give a round of applause for Jerry.
And else.
You should come to the open market today.
Huh?
You should go to the open market today.
Yeah, I should have.
Come grab some ice cream.
So here's coupons. If anybody wants coupons.